It really was just a whim. I always liked having some kind of creative outlet, but I just graduated college and then thought I was going to go into social work. Did it for like 6 months, didn't like it. Then I just switched it up and randomly went with I like to work out a bunch of that time and went and worked as a trainer at a gym. After a few months, didn't like that. And then I was thinking about going back to grad school, thinking about getting a tech degree in graphic design. I was thinking about all kinds of different like possibilities, marketing. And then my ex-wife just said, "Hey, why don't you go try this open mic?" She knew I had done sketch comedy in college. And so she's like, "Why don't you go try this?" And totally did it on a whim, liked it enough to come back. And then the next time, liked it enough to come back the third time, and then it just kept kind of going from there. But it wasn't. I wasn't thinking about stand-up for years before I did it, or paying attention to it closely growing up. It was not like that. Yeah. Well, I kind of cheated, where I had a lot of friends from college that were still in the area all come out to the show, so it was a very kind of favorable crowd. And then I had a couple drinks, and it was like an open mic. Which, looking back, it had a great setup. There was no distractions. It was in a club like this. There was no bar around it, and so it wasn't too bad. Like the first time, I think it was the third or the fourth time when I really bombed, where I was like, "Oh, this is how it is when you don't do well." Historically, my favorite special is just for nostalgia, partially, but Eddie Murphy Delirious. That was. I didn't listen to a lot of stand-up growing up, but I legitimately wore that tape out. I had that cassette tape as a kid and listened to it so many times. Eventually, the tape just broke. At one point, I had the entire thing memorized. I could do the entire special, and then after that, Bill Burr's one that's black and white. I can't remember the name of it. That's a really good one. Dave Chappelle, a couple of his, and then George Carlin. It is kind of weird. I really don't listen to much stand-up. I kind of live in my own little world a little bit. But earlier on, Bill Hicks, Doug Stanhope, love a lot of those guys. But they're even my favorites, like Carlin and Stanhope and Hicks and Pryor and Chappelle. I don't listen to all their stuff because I don't want it in my head. I don't want to feel like I'm doing one of their bits. As a kid, it was Naked Gun. It was Leslie Nielsen. I loved how ridiculous that movie was. And then now, man, I really like the first National Lampoon movie, Fletch. Chevy Chase, I like a lot of his stuff. But as far as like newer stuff, The Hangover, the first one, really, really funny. But I truly don't watch a lot of comedies, and I don't watch any sitcoms. So the last sitcom I watched, this is so long ago, that I love was Arrested Development, like the first 3 seasons. And then the British version of The Office, which was like over 10 years ago. But other than that, like I know there's a lot of good ones, like Parks and Rec and The American Office, and actually one I really liked was Reno 911. I guess it's not a sitcom now. I don't know. I'm terrible with this stuff. I don't watch a lot of TV, actually. Sketch was my favorite one. It was growing up was Kids in the Hall, and then after that, Saturday Night Live and In Living Color were kind of like a tie. And then my favorite one of all time though was Chappelle Show. 2 seasons. First 2 seasons Chappelle Show. Just oh my god. I like every episode had at least one sketch where I was tears in my eyes. I was laughing so hard. So funny. My favorite joke a comic has ever written was a Mitch Hedberg joke because it's so short and accomplishes so much comedy in so few words. It's just so beautifully constructed. And it was the Mitch Hedberg joke where he said, I used to do drugs. I still do, but I used to too. It's like 11 words or something. It's beautifully small and the whole setup, twist, punch, all there. Maria Bamford, she's so creative and clever and quirky and just weird and hilarious. It would be great just to kind of watch her work. And then also, it's funny, like in a fantasy world where they weren't insanely famous, I would love to work with like Dave Chappelle or Bill Burr or some of those guys. But then in the real world, they have such rabid fan bases that it wouldn't be fun to work with them, because like you would just be up there, the crowd would just be waiting for you to be done so they could see the person they've come to see. Those are guys that I really love to hang with and watch. And actually Brian Regan's a guy I've opened up for in the past, and he was my favorite guy just from a technical place, just to watch him work and watch him take an idea and bend it and pound it into a bit over a few shows. Bill Hicks, probably number one. Maybe Richard Pryor, number two. George Carlin, almost a tie for number two. So those are the top three. Sam Kinison will be fun to get roasted by. And then Greg Giraldo. I have a comedic podcast right now that honestly is pretty fulfilling. We're pitching some shows that are unscripted. Actually, I ended up pitching a scripted one too. And if one of them worked out, great. But I don't really have those aspirations. I really, I like the Carlin kind of model of just pounding out hour after hour of stand-up. And then for another creative thing, I'd rather honestly write a book than do a film or something. Yeah, but if one falls in my lap, I'm not going to say no. Hopefully just continuing to build a loyal, kind of growing following in more markets, and hopefully in 5 years, I'm able to do, if I could do 25, 30 cities a year that have, small theater, could pack them out, or maybe maybe 40 markets or whatever. But hopefully it's just building what it's going right now, where it's when I used to watch Brian Regan, he's not famous for, as far as for middle America, for anything. He's not famous that way, but he has a loyal stand-up following. And when you watch somebody work in front of a crowd that only knows them because of stand-up or because of their comedic projects that they came up with themselves, versus somebody who is famous for a TV show or for some reality show, sometimes crowds come out to see somebody because they're famous, and sometimes they come just because they love that person's point of view. And when I saw Regan's crowd, and I had seen Larry the Cable Guy and Ron White before them, that sold it for me. That's all I want. I just want people, a room full of people who are there just because of my point of view. You can find all the streaming platforms like Spotify, Pandora, any of those streaming services where they have music and everything, YouTube, all that stuff. And then you can find my last special on Amazon Prime. And then the podcast, Time Suck, is a thing I do every single week. So that's on Spotify and all of the podcast platforms. Hopefully they just had a lot of laughs and got to kind of escape life for a little bit. But then also I like to sneak in a couple social messages, each kind of hour, and just make them maybe rethink certain beliefs in certain ways. So if I could have them going away, they had fun, they laughed, but also I don't, now I'm starting to question how I feel about this issue or this thought. I'm Dan Cummins. Please check out my piece on acutiepie.com, and thanks for watching.